I'm Allsop. I'm an executive director at Morgan Stanley in technology. I am here to represent.
Please, can you explain in 2 or 3 sentences what you do day to day?
I'm responsible for technology change enablement. And when you have an organization that's over 80,000 people and also many, many more clients, every time you want to change something, the likelihood is there's a risk something will go wrong. And that's where I come in. So if you think about it at home, when you buy a new TV, and the old one was working just fine, but you like the new one with the shiny new remote or whatever it might be. When you go and plug that in at home, what's the first thing that happens? Typically, Netflix doesn't work. Something that worked yesterday now doesn't work. And we're here to make sure we manage the risk associated with all of those tech changes that are happening hundreds of thousands of times a year at Morgan Stanley.
Please, can you tell us about your early career and how it got you to where you are today?
I went to university to study history. It's something I felt really passionate about. I believe if you can learn from the mistakes in the past, you can avoid them in the future. So on day one, when they said we would also be concurrently studying mandatory computing, I can't tell you that I was particularly happy by the prospect. However, it turned out to be the most forward-thinking operation within a university that I can think of, because it actually put me in a position when I left university that I could use a computer. And at the time, 25 years ago, lots of my peers didn't have much tech experience. We didn't have mobile phones. We didn't necessarily have computers at home even. It wasn't like the world that it is now. So actually being able to use a computer was hugely important in getting me into a position where I started doing technology at work as part of a wider role with a recruitment consultancy. And then from there, I moved through, all of my roles have been pure tech from there on in. So if it hadn't been for that unexpected and perhaps at the time unwanted education opportunity, I certainly wouldn't have been fulfilling a career in technology now.
What advice would you give women wanting to make a career switch to tech with no previous tech experience?
Perhaps I didn't realize this back then, but it should be really obvious to people now. Everything is about technology now. You can't do anything without a computer anymore. Even if you are, let's say you're an artist and you specializing in oil paintings, you can't sell your oil paintings without having access to technology, without having a website, without having email to be able to email the gallery that's going to put them on display for you. And so really, for me, it's about embracing it now and you taking control of it. Don't wait for it to take control of you, because in the future, there are so many jobs that are going to be coming up that you would never have known were going to exist. The job I do right now, I didn't know it was a thing. It didn't exist when I was at university. And yet it's something I find absolutely fascinating every day. And the breadth of technology that I get to work with, the breadth of people that I get to work with is amazing. So I'd say, what's the worst that can happen? Give it a go.
What's a personal strength of yours that has led to your success as a tech leader?
I think the first skill I would say that I think I have, and which I think has really helped me, is empathy. And we forget sometimes when we talk about computers, we forget that when you're in technology, you're not only working with computers, you're working with lots of people every day, people from different cultural backgrounds, people from different technical expertise. And actually, if you have empathy, that can really help you to come to the best solutions and make sure that you retain the best people in your team, or you get to work with the best people. So empathy would be a really big one for me. But I also think that I've had to work on some skills I've had to really consider have been things like tenacity and drive. It's not always easy. If you want something that's going to be fulfilling, it doesn't make it necessarily the most straightforward path. It doesn't necessarily make it something that you come home from and every day and think that was a breeze. You have to work hard. So I think being tenacious is something I've had to work on. And also something I feel I have, but you have to maintain, is curiosity, because technology is changing so fast. The technology languages that I learned 20 years ago are not really the in thing anymore. Does that mean that I can't go on to learn other things? No, absolutely not. They stand as a sort of a stepping stone to the new opportunities that you might be able to go away and learn. But you have to remain curious. You have to want to learn. It's not an industry that stands still.
What advice would you have for our community who are earlier on in their career and really need to build their soft skills?
First thing is, if you're talking to Code First girls, that's half the battle won. So my first recommendation would be to be talking to Code First girls and taking advantage of the fantastic courses that are available to help upskill you. And beyond that, I would always say that your network is everything. Network would be the number 2 after Code First girls.
What are the biggest advantages of working in a technology role?
Hard to know where to start with that question, because for me, technology is an unexpected passion. I didn't expect to love technology as much as I did. I thought I was going to be going down this history path. But when I look at technology as a whole, and you think about all of the opportunity, I couldn't begin to name every job that exists in technology. I couldn't even begin to think of them. I speak to women who have the most fantastically, incredibly interesting careers, working at fashion houses, with digital avatars and designing runway shows on digital avatars, all the way through to women who are designing algorithms that are generating the movement of money around the world to the tune of trillions a day. So there are so many different opportunities. It's so exciting. There's a chance to go and try different things. And if they don't gel with you, and certainly I've had positions in my career that perhaps haven't been my most favorite positions, but I've always learned something from them.
What advice would you give women trying to balance family commitments and a career in tech?
Communication is really key for starters. So first of all, make sure you're communicating with your line manager, with your team at work, with your family. And if you have more than one job, obviously communicating with everybody so that people understand your position. Set some boundaries as well is really important. So if, for example, you're working in technology, and by no means is this a specific problem for technology, I think it's a problem for women working in careers in any industry. But if you, for example, know that a deal breaker for you is picking the children up from school and spending, dinner, bed, bath time with them, then you need to make that your point and you work out how you work around that. I think there are ways of managing a career in tech. And I think because of its flexible nature, because tech roles are often distributed, you don't always tend to be working with people in the immediate office that you're in. You will, of course, but not entirely and exclusively. I think it gives you a great opportunity to manage your life in a different way that you might not get in a different sort of industry, perhaps.
What barriers have you faced and overcome as a woman in tech?
I guess in the day-to-day, you don't necessarily consider that you're experiencing barriers. It's perhaps after, when somebody else points out to you that something has happened, or you become aware of something through the media perhaps, that makes you think, oh, perhaps that was something that was a barrier that I had to deal with.
What advice would you give to any woman facing imposter syndrome?
A couple of strands to this. The first one is about imposter syndrome, and the people who have it do tend to be women rather than men. It does tend to be something, not exclusively, but it does tend to be something that impacts women disproportionately. And it impacts women who typically are women who are succeeding. So I think getting a bit of a grip around imposter syndrome and understanding when it's genuine and when you really don't know something about the topic that you're being asked to talk about. And that does happen. And I'm sure it's happened to most people that are here. It could be not in the workplace. I was asked by my sister-in-law to talk to my nephew about phonics. I have no idea about phonics. So my apprehension was entirely reasonable in that case. It wasn't imposter syndrome, it was genuine. But I think that with imposter syndrome, if you can recognize the signs that you think you're feeling like you have imposter syndrome, and then my personal view on this is to keep reminding yourself of all of the things you have achieved, and that you've got your place on merit. You are at that table with your own merits. You didn't get there for any other reason. You weren't given the lets. You didn't get a free pass. There was no kind of step through the interview process and bypass them all. So I think that's really important for women to remember. When it comes to knowing your worth, again, I think reminding yourself of your successes is important, but speak up. Do not assume that everybody is going to notice you're doing a good job. Do not assume that because this particular client sent you an email saying, well done, that your boss has a crystal ball and he knows that you got that message. So I think that I would say speaking up is really, really important, but also consider the language that people use to you and consider what people ask you. So a particular pet peeve of mine is asking people, but in particular women, in an interview situation, what do you want to earn? If you get asked that question, do not answer it. You should be earning what the role is worth and not potentially less because you would have been satisfied with less because you didn't know any differently. So I think that for me, not just about speaking up, but also listening to what people are saying to you.
What advice would you give any woman wanting to find a mentor?
Mentoring is really important, but also sponsoring sponsors are very important as well. So I would be looking for both. I'd be looking for a mentor that I can work with to get through those like grim problems that you just need a bit of support thinking about it from a different perspective. I'd also be looking for people who are going to go and bang the table for you and advocate for you, because that is certainly something that women need more of. They need somebody in the room when the door is shut and they are not in that room who is going to go and really punch the wall for them about why they should get that opportunity or why they should get that progression. But when it comes specifically to mentors, I think the first thing is to know that a mentor needs to be somebody who's going to challenge you. Anybody can go and just have a nice chat with somebody, but what you really need is somebody who's going to lead you to a different perspective, who's going to have the ability to challenge you in a constructive way. And so I wouldn't assume that you go to the first person you think, oh, they're really nice and I'll try them, because really what you want is the challenge. Equally, I would say don't be afraid to ask. What's the worst thing that can happen? The person is too busy mentoring loads of other people. In that position, typically, people will make you an alternative suggestion. So ask the question, be brave. I know it feels a bit intimidating, but really what is the worst that can happen? But I would also say about mentors as well, when you're talking to people about becoming a mentor of yours or becoming their mentee, be prepared to kiss some frogs. Because the first person that you, for want of a better expression, hook up with may not be the person that is going to be your mentor for the next 5, 10, 15 years. It may be you have one meeting, you do not gel, you're not feeling it, or they're not feeling it, and you need to be prepared to move on to the next one. So it's not one of those situations where you think, I really want a mentor. Oh, hurrah, I found one. Because it could be that's only a short-term stopgap or it doesn't work out. So kiss frogs is my recommendation. Try lots of people and see which works for you.
What successful techniques have you seen or used to make job specs appeal to diverse candidates?
Job spec is such a funny phrase, because actually when I'm looking to hire somebody, I'm really wanting to bring them to a career. I'm looking for them to come and have the time with Morgan Stanley doing multiple jobs, multiple seats across a period of time. I'm not really thinking about it as a job. But that withstanding, if we are talking about a job spec as opposed to a career spec or an initiation spec, then the first thing I think is really important is to ensure that you have something on it that talks about flexible working. Because flexible working comes in many different forms, but really don't make your candidate base have to ask, because many people won't ask, and many people just won't apply because they'll assume it's not offered. So make sure that is front and center on that paperwork when you advertise it. I think that's really, really key. Something else that's important is using gender neutral language. So we see many job specs which are, they infer that they're for men. And unconsciously or consciously, those specs go out and people then don't apply, because as a woman, you may feel, well, subconsciously you're thinking this isn't for me because it talks so exclusively in male language. So I think those are the top tips I would give for specs.
What advice do you have for employers wanting to implement a mentorship scheme or buddy system?
Affinity groups, I think, are one of the key ways that you can build a community within your organisation that helps you to build that support network that means people are more likely to stay. They feel that they have support when things are maybe not going their way or when they want to try something different. The affinity groups that we have at Morgan Stanley, and in particular the Women in Technology Affinity Group, is is a fantastic opportunity for women to build a network. So they do go out and they do cocktail making classes. We have, during the pandemic, we were doing baking at home, where somebody would walk you through how to cook something, and we'd have 15 women and quite often a lot of children assisting with that. But all the way through to we have technical talks. We do work around things that we know women need to understand more about from the soft skills side, and imposter syndrome would be one of those examples. But there are a variety of different ways that you can engage that community, and whether that is always technical or not is another matter. So we also run things like financial awareness programs. We know that women are less likely to take a risk. Women are more likely to invest in for example, in an ISA that is a cash ISA than it is a stocks and shares ISA, because stocks and shares ISA seem a bit scary. But we want to encourage more women to think about taking a risk, not wild risks that are uncontrolled, but just to think about doing things a bit differently. And those affinity groups, therefore, are one of the big reasons that we find people are more keen to stay with an organisation.